And welcome everybody. We're glad you're here for track one. And the first hour of track one is really going to focus on our kindergarten through third grade students. And in this particular hour, we're going to spend time really thinking about how we accelerate our students' foundational skills instruction using the SIPS program. So we're thrilled that you're spending some time with us today. We're thrilled that we get to follow Valentina's amazing keynote and talk more specifically now about the SIPS program. As I shared earlier, our mission as a nonprofit is really to focus on supporting classrooms and teachers in transforming their instruction for students. And today we're really going to think about SIPS as an intervention for foundational skills instruction that really moves the needle on supporting our students to develop into those readers, writers, and thinkers that we know they need to be both now and in the future. So in this session, what we're going to spend our time doing over the next hour is really learning about the 3 SIPS levels particular to kindergarten through third grade. So SIPS beginning level, extension level, and challenge. We're going to focus a little bit on the importance of text reading and orchestrating those skills together. And of course, we're going to hear from the wonderful panel of educators that are joining us today. And so before we introduce ourselves, we would love to hear a little bit about you guys. So I'm going to launch a poll and give you a chance to jump in and let us know your familiarity with SIPS, as well as your role. And once I give folks a second to kind of populate their answers, I'll share the results with everybody so that we can all see who's with us today. You guys are fast in this poll. We are already at 50% voted. We'll give it another couple seconds as some folks are making their selections. And then we'll see who's joining us today. All right, just another couple seconds and I will end the poll. All right, and let me share the results. So you take a second to take a look at that. Almost 70% of us have either just heard about it or know a bit about it. It's perfect. Thank you for being here today. We're excited to share with you today. We have smaller percentages of folks who know enough to start teaching it, are currently in the role of teaching it, and supporting others. And then let's take a look at who's with us. Most of us in the room today are teachers, both general ed and special ed teachers. We have some EL teachers with us, as well as interventionists, Title I reading specialists. Don't we have a lot of titles in schools? So many of us are here, school-based leader, district leader, as well as others. So welcome. We're glad you're here and you're glad you're spending your precious time with us today. So I'm going to do just a bit of introductions. So first, I would love to introduce the collaborative classroom team who's with us today. Our colleagues, Maria Arnett, Tricia Bennett, Dawn Castilleja, are here to support your questions in the chat, your questions in the Q&A in particular, and just to help you navigate through this session. My colleague Gina, who you met in the previous session, is also here to support those conversations. My special colleague, Tamara Slaughter, is with us today, and she'll be hosting the panel session that we will be the second half of our time together today. And I'm Marisa Ramirez-Stuckey, and I'm happy to kick us off and get us started. We are especially thrilled that we have 3 educators who will be joining us today and sharing their expertise around SIPS. We have Janet Gulden from Burnsville-Eagan-Savage School District in Minnesota, who is the SISA, and I'll let her share kind of what that stands for. She is a district level coordinator. We have Gina Perakolosi, who's an interventionist in Springfield, Massachusetts, who'll be sharing her expertise, as well as Jacklyn Wilson, who's the program director of Literacy Now, based in Houston and part of the Houston ISD district there. So we can't wait to hear from these leaders as we move forward. So I want us to take just a second and read the definition of SIPS. So take a second and look at that blue box And then respond in the chat on which words and phrases really resonated the most with you as you read the definition of SIPs. Here they come: systematic, differentiated, automatic. Oh, that's going too fast. I can't read them all. Confident. Yes, thank you. Fluent readers. Accuracy. Such important pieces, especially considering what we just kind of learned from Valentina and her thoughtfulness in explaining how all of the aspects of reading come together. As we think about this SIPs definition and all these pieces that are really resonating with you guys as we move forward, let's consider how they come together in order to really build a reader. And so I'd like to start with a little background about the SIPs program itself. And the SIPs program was developed by Dr. John Scheffelbein. And if you are from California, and we have a lot of California friends with us today, you may have heard of Dr. John Scheffelbein over the course of your time in California. He was a professor at Cal State University in Sacramento. And his research really focused on systematic instruction for students, because for himself, what he noticed, he was an actual teacher, guys, imagine that. He taught first grade for a long time. In many diverse populations in Alaska and Arizona and New Mexico. And what he realized through his teaching was that many of the materials he had didn't support what he knew students needed to get. And so what he did was develop the SIPs program with an eye towards what do teachers need to know and be able to do in order to develop the foundational skills we know are necessary for our students. It was really the lens at which Dr. Scheffelbein looked at the work that he developed and put forward. So we're thrilled that we really think about the research basis that Dr. Scheffelbein put forward for us and how that lives on in the SIPs program. Now you'll notice that today we really spent some time as we thought about the title for this, really thinking about the word acceleration. And I know that many of us over the last school year and into this school year have really experienced some very differing kinds of learning and teaching than we've done in the past. We want to spend just a moment really thinking about the difference that acceleration can make. And I think it's often juxtaposed with this idea of remediation, right? So when we think about remediating students, oftentimes what happens for our students is we slow things down. We give them more time. We think about what they've missed. And so what I want to offer is that when we kind of shift that thinking to acceleration, we're thinking about the fact that time cannot be wasted. And if students aren't where we need them to be, we want to think about how do we make that ground up faster? How do we support our students in acquiring the skills they need at a faster pace so that we can close the gap rather than slowing them down? And I think it is sometimes a bit of semantics, but it is a shift in mindset. I had someone tell me once, kids don't get fat drinking skim milk. And that really stuck with me as I think about, in particular, foundational skills instruction. How do we fatten them up? How do we ensure that we get them to where they need to be? And how do we deliver them and support them with the instructional nutrition necessary to get them to that next place? And that's really where we're going to spend our time today. So I want to give you a moment to take a look at the phonics continuum. And the word, this idea of a continuum helps us know and helps us think about what Valentina shared with us this morning or earlier today, that phonics is a means to an end, right? All the things that we learn along the way are so that we become more automatic and more less cognitive load as we move ourselves forward to meet the goal of reading comprehension. And so today we're going to talk about each of the SIPs levels and which aspects of the phonics continuum those levels address, so that we move our students along that continuum at a pace that allows them to catch up and where they need to be. So really specifically about the SIPs program. The SIPs program is really about mastery It is about application and connected text and acceleration. So let's break those down. We have very explicit and structured lessons in SIPs. Students learn routines that allow them to take ownership of their learning, that allows them to master the instructional pieces that we're looking for. So in particular, we often introduce, review continuously, and then apply. So one of the things that we'll talk about as we move through each of the SIPs levels briefly is the ways in which at every SIPs level, students are applying their skills in connected text to meet the orchestration necessary to develop a reader. And then as a part of all of the SIPs work, we develop the phonological skills that are necessary to support our students in understanding the spelling sounds that then become the building blocks of the words, both to get them off the page by decoding and to get them on the page by encoding. We're going to think carefully about the ways in which word reading becomes more automatic, sight words become more automatic for our students. And again, when those things become orchestrated, we build the fluency necessary for comprehension. So those are the building blocks of the SIPs lessons specifically. So let's take it one by one. As we think about that phonics continuum, the very first level of that phonics continuum is the simple alphabetic phase. And that's the phase that is addressed in SIPs beginning level. So in this particular level for our students, we're looking at ensuring that they have a strong mastery of short vowels, of single consonants, that they're able to blend and decode CVC words, and that they also take the time to move themselves through those consonant blends and consonant diagraphs. So those explicit structured lessons support the students in being able to do that work. Then what you notice here in the middle is the story charts and the small books. So from the very beginning, the students have a command enough of how to decode and read connected text from the very beginning of their work in SIPs beginning. Oftentimes we would think about beginning as covering the kindergarten standards. So beginning is appropriate for first graders who still need that support in kindergarten, or kindergarten as a core piece of instruction. From SIPs beginning, we then move into the extension level of SIPs. And in extension, we're really covering the spelling pattern phase of the phonics continuum. In this particular program in extension, what we're really developing is command of long vowels. And I am a former first grade teacher, and I think about the vowel combinations. I think about the silent E marker and how difficult some of those concepts were for first graders to grasp. That's the crux of what happens in extension. We also spend time in extension really thinking about our controlled vowels, the consonant diphthongs, the hard and soft C and G, becoming more flexible in the ways in which we decode words. So SIPs extension really thinks about what would typically be considered first grade, part of the phonics continuum, and elevates those concepts for our students. Again, as always, connected text that supports those particular strategies and skills are included. So you notice on the far right, the storybooks that are there are controlled decodable texts so that students are able to practice their burgeoning skills in the connected texts. And then about halfway through extension, we're supporting our kids in transitioning then to easy to read trade books. So if we think about books that are typically at a level J or K or a level DRA level 18 or 19, that allows our students to now orchestrate their skills in more complex texts so that they become more flexible. And then the last phase I want to take us to is SIPs Challenge, where here we're really focusing on the polysyllabic and morphemic work that we know is essential for our students to be able to transition to much of the content area vocabulary that they're going to experience as they move through the older grades. So in particular, SIPs Challenge focuses on teaching kids the 6 syllable types, understanding the schwa. I love it when schwa comes up as it did with Valentina earlier. And it also starts to get into morphemic meanings. So we start to help our students really understand the ways in which words break down, what those word parts mean, and how we use that as generative language to move ourselves forward. I often think about the lessons and the experiences that happen for kids in SIPs beginning and extension is what we typically think of as phonics instruction. Oftentimes that phonics instruction stops before our students have a command of what is in SIPs challenge. I think about how if every child had the opportunity to have the content in SIPs challenge, what would happen as they encountered those polysyllabic words that we see come up in their physics classes in high school, and their biology classes that come up later. Such an important piece of continuing to complete that phonics continuum with SIPs challenge. A huge part of SIPs is also the differentiated piece, which many of you picked up on in that SIPs definition. SIPs is designed to place students at their point of need. So again, if we think about that phonics continuum, the SIPs placement assessment helps us put students right at the place where they need to move forward. They're not wasting time learning things they already know, but they're also not pushed ahead into something they're not quite ready for. So the SIPs placement assessment really helps pinpoint that instruction for our students. And then similarly, all along the way in beginning and extension, there are mastery tests that help us as teachers know whether or not our students are meeting those targets all along the way. So before I get ready to turn it over to my colleague Tamara, who's going to facilitate just a wonderful, rich discussion with these educators, I wanted to take just a moment to think about the elements of the structured lessons that are a part of SIPs and connect them back to some of the things that Valentina shared with us in the keynote. Phonological awareness is the building block. And in SIPs lessons, what you'll notice with a careful eye is that the phonological awareness pieces that the students are engaging in, which is just happening orally, they're not putting their eyes on text at that point, sets them up for those spelling sound correspondences when they do put their eyes on text, and really helping them think through what sound is represented by what symbol, and how do I solidify that knowledge to move through phases of word recognition. We also focus deeply in those SIPs lessons on sight words because we know that learning some of those words quickly and efficiently helps unlock connected text for us in a quicker fashion. So those sight words are essential to the SIPs work so that students can unlock connected text sooner. The other piece that Valentina brought forward for us really around the decoding encoding relationship comes to life in SIPs through the guided spelling lessons. And so students immediately, as they learn how to lift it off the page through decoding, at the end of the lesson, they put it back down on the page through encoding. And so those guided spelling routines help solidify that knowledge for our students. And then, as you've heard me say all along, practicing that work in connected text so that we provide more automaticity, more accuracy, and ultimately leading to more fluent reading all along the way. So I'm going to invite you to download a SIPs lesson. My colleagues are going to put a link in the chat so that you are able to do that. And you might want to take a look at that lesson as we move into the panel discussion that is going to happen with Janet and Jacklyn and Gina as we move forward. I'm listening to my own, phonemes, Jacklyn, Janet, and Gina as we move into that. So if you give me just a second, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see each other. And with that, Tamara, I'm going to turn it right over to you to facilitate our wonderful panelists.
Great. Thank you, Marisa. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad that you were able to join us. We have 299 participants, so this is a huge group. And I'm excited that you'll get to hear from people who are actually implementing SIPs right now, and they can speak to how it is supporting their students. So we'll get started. I'd love for our panelists to share a little bit about themselves, the work they do, and the district and organization that they work for. So Janet, would you mind getting us started?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Janet Gulden. I am a SISA coordinator, which is System Improvement and Student Achievement, which is essentially teaching and learning. So I'm a teaching and learning coordinator in Burnsville, Minnesota. We are a suburb of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and we are an increasingly diverse district. And we also have an increasingly higher number of English learner students. Was I supposed to say anything else, Tamara? That was it.
Great.
Okay.
That's great. Okay. Who might go next?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gina Perakolosi, and I live and teach in Springfield, Massachusetts. I've worked for the Springfield Public Schools for 24 years, and we are a diverse group of students, a lot of EL learners, low socioeconomic, and we've really seen an improvement with our students using SIPs. So I'm excited to share some of the highlights.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jacklyn Wilson, and I am the program director with Literacy Now. We are a nonprofit organization where we work with currently 10 schools within HISD, which is Houston Independent School District, where we support students who are majority tier 3 students and some tier 2 from K through 2nd. We recently started using SIPs this school year, and we have seen tremendous growth with the program. And so I'm glad to be here with the other panelists to share our experience with the program.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll just jump right in. I think about this idea of action-based research. And I'd love for you all to share what role action-based research played in determining which curricular resources you would use to best meet the needs of your students.
Well, I can start. We got started with SIPs because our district adopted the collaborative classroom literacy resources of being a reader and making meaning. So it just became the idea that SIPs was sort of a natural thing for us to look at, and it became sort of a ground up type of thing where the reading interventionists were saying to me, hey, I hear they have this SIPs that goes along with collaborative classroom. We'd like to look at it. So we started with those materials, ordered some of them, and then had some of our teachers work with it. And what we found was that SIPs filled a gap that we had in terms of what our reading interventionists were doing with kids, because for the most part, previous to SIPs, we used leveled literacy intervention, LLI, which is an excellent resource. We still use that, but it was really the only resource that our reading interventionists had, and it's not a fit for every student. And so SIPs really helped fill in that gap of what we were missing. We also had some reading interventionists who were still using Orton Gillingham. They'd used it for years. I was trained in Orton Gillingham years and years ago, and we were really ready to move people away from that. We didn't have a lot of teachers using it, but we had enough. And my concern with that always was that it wasn't connected enough. There weren't enough text connections for kids to practice what they were learning. And so we were looking for something where there would be connected text and fluency practice along with phonemic instruction, the decoding. And so SIPs really was a very good fit for that. That's how we got started. And we have SIPs in all 8 of our elementaries. It is the primary intervention that we use, reading interventionists. We use it in gen ed, reading interventionists, and then our elementary special education teachers also use it.
Thank you. Gina, what would you add?
Springfield sounds like the mirror image to what Janet just said. We primarily use leveled LLI, which is a great resource. We had a lot of gains in terms of comprehension. However, when we would analyze our F&P data when we were done, we realized our students were really having difficulties with decoding. And we weren't sure how to tackle that. The level of expertise with teachers throughout our district varies. So that was something that our district really, I think, took into consideration once we adopted the suite, which we had making meaning, being a reader and being a writer, when we saw SIPs came along, we thought, oh, let's take a look at this. And our school piloted it for 1 year, and we kind of dove right in without too much training. We did get a lot of training from Kim Still, who used to be in Springfield with us, and we loved it, which made our district take a look at it. And we had most of the elementary schools in Springfield adopted it last year with a big training through the collaborative. And we've seen great success with it, especially with the connected text. And our students even point out the connections that they're making between reading the mixed lists, writing the words, and seeing those words in their little books. It's been really a great experience.
Thank you. And I like how we can connect that to the keynote and Valentina's time that she spent on connected text and just being really explicit and systematic and intensive with the work that we do with our students that we're trying to accelerate. So yes, I definitely agree with both you, Janet, and Gina. Jacklyn, I know you work from a different aspect. So tell us how you guys did action research when looking at SIPs.
So when we were looking for something new, because the curriculums that we used before, we used a combination of different things. And so it left too many error of interpretation when delivering the instruction to the students. So I solicited the support of a few of my interventionists to like, okay, let's focus and find something that's action research based, that's going to focus a lot on foundational skills, where we knew that there was a gap there that was missing. So we narrowed it down to 3, and I worked closely with Don, who was very helpful in making our final decision to move forward with SIPs. And so we tried it out with a couple of students during the summer and said, okay, hey, this is going to be the program for us to choose. I love that it's very explicit. There's no room for error. The instructions are there. The videos that are on the portal are very helpful with our teachers. And so for me, because I get to see it in action when I visit the schools, and you can see the progress and where the students are making those easy connections each time.
That's amazing. Really great news that you guys are sharing. So I know you talked a little bit about, Janet, all 3 of you actually talked a little bit about what you were using for interventions prior to bringing SIPs on board. I'd like to know what do typical interventions look like now that you've brought SIPs on board? For example, who have you targeted to do the interventions? What does the time frame look like? Can you share a little bit about how a typical SIPs day might look?
Sure, I can speak for myself. Our school, started a little differently this year as everyone else, and our building principal made it what I think was a wise decision at the beginning of the year to put a second adult in each classroom to help with support. And eventually we scaffolded that support. And now we have 4 intervention teachers that primarily work in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. And we deliver SIPs instruction pretty much throughout the day. We took a hard look at some data in 2nd grade, and we found that many of our students were reading below set 3, which was very concerning because that is kindergarten level. So we did a big push into 2nd grade to get those kiddos up with their foundational skills. But right now, most of us, like right now, I have about 7 SIPs groups that I take throughout the day. And because I'm taking both 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, I'm luckily able to not have to pull students from their core instructional block. I take them during their guided reading block, or we have built-in intervention times throughout the day. One group I take right before we come back to remote learning after their lunch break. So it's been working pretty well so far. We may be going back hybrid, so we'll see what happens come, April, but so far so good this year.
Okay, great. And so Janet and Jacklyn, from your experiences, what does a typical SIPS lesson look like? Who's doing the intervention, and then just thinking about time constraints and whether you're hybrid or remote or fully in person, how are you making that work for students?
So I'll go ahead and take this one too. So for us, we actually do pull out intervention. So we work with 10 schools. And so we have 624 students who participate in our program. And so where we have 4 interventionists at each location, we have a ratio of 1 to 2, 1 to 3 students, to where we're able to do really intensive intervention instruction with those groups. And so the way our interventionists are divided up, we might have 1 or 2 that are working on letter names inventory, and then 1 who's doing beginning and 1 that's doing extension. So we group the students based on that. So those interventionists are able to specifically focus on that, whether it's letter inventory or beginning or extension levels. So they're very focused on those students. And so on average, our rotations, some schools we work with students 2 days a week, and then some are 4 days a week, where we're spending about 25 minutes per group, 1 to 2 ratio per group in those schools.
And for us, when we adopted a collaborative classroom about 5 years ago, we began with a very strict fidelity implementation, in that no students were to be pulled from any of their core literacy instruction. And so that led our buildings, each of our elementary buildings, to create a specific 30-minute intervention block. We call it win time, what I need time. And that exists in all of our buildings. And so that is where intervention comes in. That is where all students, regardless of their reading level, they get a small group. They get some kind of small group instruction. And that's when our reading interventionists push in or pull out, and they take kids for the SIPS group. We found that has worked very well. Kids are not missing any of their core instruction. They get intervention time 5 days a week. We, like everybody, have been through multiple iterations this year, from in-person to hybrid to full distance learning. And now we are back to in-person learning for our K-5 students, although we still do have students who are in what's called our virtual academy, which they get all of their instruction online. They've elected not to return to in-person learning. So this year, we've managed to deliver instruction fairly well, I think, to our students, but our intent of this is that kids would get SIPS every day, 5 days a week, 30 minutes at a time.
Thank you. And so since we landed on this place of remote, hybrid, fully in person, I'd like for us to just take a little bit of time to talk a little bit about, if you are doing it remotely, how is that going? What are some of the resources that you utilize that Collaborative Classroom provides to support teachers in implementing SIPS in a remote situation?
So we definitely took a look at the response to intervention remotely guide on the portal, and took a look at all of those resources before we began implementing. And throughout the summer, a group of us from Harena started creating PowerPoint slides for beginning, extension, and plus. And those have really worked so well remotely. I feel like they're paying as good attention as they would be if I were in person. So we just share our screen. I go into a classroom. The classroom teacher puts me in a breakout room with the students, and I share my screen, and the whole lesson is on the slide. And I was, if people haven't checked out the Facebook group for Collaborative Classroom, there are so many resources on there. And I feel like, Gina, you must eat and sleep with your phone, because I put a question or someone else puts a question, and the answer is like within the hour you have an answer. So that's how we've been presenting remotely, and it's going pretty well. We also, for the students to have access to their stories, we're using Schoology. So I put a folder into that classroom's reading course, and then I just copy and paste the link to whatever story they're working on, and students can access that during IDR or after school, or days when I'm doing the mastery tests, I have students read while I'm pulling into a breakout room.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
So I agree with Gina on Facebook. So this summer, I spent a lot of time on the Facebook community. Thanks to Dawn for that recommendation. And so we received so much wealth of knowledge from people who were already using it. And so we started off in the fall semester completely virtual. And so we work on Microsoft Teams to where we have channels to where we meet with some students in person or a hybrid model or 100% remote. Every school is different based on the needs of that campus. And so our interventionists have been so talented in how they put the PowerPoints together. And so on Teams, we have an interactive PowerPoint to where if we post something on there, the students are able to like follow through and they can draw on there to where we can see their writing samples as well on Microsoft Teams. And so I agree that the students who are remote, because sometimes they do flip-flop back to in-person and virtual learning, I feel like it's the same whether they're in person or remote. I don't think there's any difference because they're still getting that same level of instruction.
And ours has been very similar. Our virtual academy teachers have relied on PowerPoints. We do have two reading interventionists that just work with Virtual Academy and no other schools. So they are specific to that, which has helped a lot. They have also found that using their document cameras has also been a really, they brought their document cameras home and they use that also as a way of helping to kids view things in a different way. And we've relied on SISA, which is the learning management system that we use for K-3. To provide links for kids. And overall, I think that we have done the very best we can under the circumstances of virtual learning. And our teachers have just been so creative in finding ways to connect with kids and get that instruction out to our students.
Excellent. Thank you all for sharing.
Tamara, can I add something? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yes.
So, and another key component that we did for our remote students, we didn't want them to feel left out. We also made literacy kits. So the same things that the students have in person, they're also able to have it at home too to participate.
That's great. That's great. And I'm sure that really supports as far as parental support, being able to have that that extra work after school hours. So I think that's really excellent. So we're going to, I guess, backtrack a little bit. And I want to ask you guys, how did you determine who the SIPS students would be? How did you identify who would be a student that would be receiving the SIPS program?
Well, we use FastBridge and we rely on that data quite heavily in creating a pool of students. We look at kids who are below the 33rd percentile, and then FastBridge uses the high risk and some risk category. And so we pull those kids in, and in our buildings, our data teams look at those students. And from there, they determine at the building level who they might give the SIPS assessment to or the SIPS placement test to. And they work from there based on what the data for the placement tests say. I think we struggle, and probably everyone struggles, is that we have more students who need SIPS than we have teachers who can teach them or groups that are available to them. And so one of the struggles that we, ongoing struggles in our building for everything is, do we take the very, very lowest students and start with them? Do we take more of the kids who are kind of in the middle, or do we take the kids on the bubble who might, with some very intensive short-term instruction, we might be able to push them up over the edge? And we don't have a good answer for that. We have not figured out, that's a struggle and a dilemma. And that is something that we just let the buildings determine that within their own data teams about who they are going to serve.
So we actually do it somewhat similar. So Literacy Now, again, is a nonprofit. So we're hired by the district to come into the schools and provide services. So what each school does, they look at the district data, Renaissance 360 is what they do when they do their pre-assessments at the beginning of the year. And so they identify those tier 3 students. And so which is about maybe 90% of the students that we work with, and those like on the cusp, the tier 2 that need that a little bit intensive instruction, and we work with those students. So we'll get, I'm going to say a bucket of students. And so we use the placement assessments to determine like, okay, does this match the Renaissance 360 data to where these students are going to be our SIP students? And so luckily, we were able to serve most of the students that we assess. Like Janet mentioned that, we wish we could serve more, but, we don't have the capability to serve all the students that probably truly need the SIPS program. But I will say that for this year compared to last year, we were able to increase our students served by 20% to where we're able to serve more students than we did last year.
Okay. I can only speak for our building at Harena Community School. This year was a little different because our district has us administer Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessment. And we had old data from back in January. So this year was a kind of a little bit different for us. We targeted 3rd grade students who were reading below a level J, and we administered the placement test and got them into SIPs. And then, as I said earlier, 2nd graders who were reading below a set 3, we had quite a few of those. All of those students are receiving SIPs instruction. And in 1st grade, I'm not quite sure because I'm not on that team this year, but I know they're definitely getting a double dose of being a reader as well as SIPs for those students that are below level for this year.
Right. And so Gina, you spoke a little bit to seeing some improvement. So my next question is, what have you noticed about students? What is your data saying? What have you noticed about acceleration? And then also just the level of confidence and competence of your students. What can you speak to about that?
Oh, it's been wonderful, especially for the 2nd graders. They came in and they were quite low. They did get into review extension 1, and their ability to read and write words with short vowels just were not there. And they are making progress. They are passing their mastery tests. A couple who didn't, I would just take them separately and do the B lesson for a couple of days and then bring them back to the group. But they are really excited at what they're able to do now. Especially, I said earlier, they're making connections. When they're reading words with like short A and they're writing words with short A, they recognize that. Fluency continues to be a little bit of an issue. I don't unfortunately have a lot of time to pop in when they're doing IDR. So I try to take the days where I'm administering mastery tests and take that block of 30 minutes to the mastery tests go by really quickly. And I try to listen in to the students who are reading. And they're doing really well. They enjoy the books. They love the routine and the predictability of it. And I think it really makes them feel in control of their learning because it's so predictable and systematic.
I 100% agree with Gina on that as well too. So I can just say we just completed some mastery checks a couple of weeks ago, and the growth is tremendous. Students are excited when they come to interventions with their interventionists. It's to the point to where we don't even have to say anything with the routines. We can point and they know exactly what to do. They are very confident when they're reading their little readers. And so I can just see that, they're eager to read, they want to read, and they're not shy about reading with the group.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have similar things to say. I think one of the things that we've struggled with is that while we have a lot of data on our students, we have mastery test data, which for the most part shows that our kids are making very good progress. And it's really helping teachers identify the kids for whom they may need to go back and backfill or teach some of the alternate lessons to. And we also, because we use FastBridge, any student who is below the 30th percentile or in the at-risk category is progress monitored every 2 weeks using the FastBridge. Mostly those are CBM assessments. So those don't necessarily directly drill down into sort of the phonetic components that SIPS has, but it certainly tells a teacher a lot about a student's ability to have connected text and fluency practice and to decode new words as they are reading. Last year, one of the things that we have wanted to do for a couple years is to collect better district-wide data specific to students who are in SIPS. And we had grand plans for that last year. But at the end of the year, we didn't have the data because we were not doing assessments at the end of last year. So for this year, although we have had students in and out of service initially at the beginning of the year, our reading interventionists were pulled to be in classrooms so that we could have smaller class sizes and have the proper distancing. And then when we went to full distance learning, they were able to go back to being reading interventionists. And now they've pivoted again because we are at in-person learning. So we have had a lot of students who have had SIPs, but it has not been as consistent as we would have been able to give them if we'd had a more typical year. So that's something that we really want to look at district-wide and really pull some data so that it's something that we can look at, track year to year in a little different way than just the way FastBridge tracks it for us. And then anecdotally, I don't teach SIPs. I'm not working with kids. I'm overseeing programs, but one of the things that the reading interventionists will often report to me is that kids will say, "Oh, I had that in my class. I know what that means." Or they will report, "I went back to my room and I was able to read whatever it was that they were reading in the set that they were in, or if they were in a shared reading." And so we get a lot of anecdotal reports from kids about the success that they feel and the things that they see that are helping them. Kids generally, we do survey our kids, and they generally report at the end of the year that SIPS has helped them become a better reader. And that's just qualitative data. It's hard. There's a whole wide range there of what kids would interpret as being a better reader, but that's generally what they report back to us. So that part of it makes us feel really good, but really strong, firm data collection that tracks kids from year to year is something that we're working on building that within our district.
And I think that data collection is so important. As we look at how students grow and they progress from grade level to grade level. I so appreciate the students' stories and how they own their learning and how they're able to express where they're growing. I think when they can speak to it, that speaks to their level of engagement with the program. So I do appreciate those rich stories. And so I just have one last question for you guys because we're getting close to our time. What are some SIPS lessons learned that you would share with others, or maybe even some resources that you would share with others?
I think training is just essential. If you are looking at SIPs and you do not have the budget or the ability to properly train your SIPs teachers, you're wasting your money. I cannot say that strong enough. When we started with SIPs, the first 2 years that we had SIPs, we relied on Collaborative Classroom to provide training for us, which was great. Gina Finito worked with us many, many times. And we started with an initial 3-hour training for any teacher who was new to SIPs. And then we had 2 1-hour, we had 2 or 3, I think the first year we had 3 1-hour follow-ups that we just did before school or after school when teachers were available. For our 3rd year, we now in district have developed 2 of our reading interventionists who are excellent SIPS teachers. Well, all of my reading interventionists are good SIPS teachers, but these two were really interested in becoming trainers. And so they now train all of our new teachers, and they also are willing to be available to other teachers who might have questions. And if teachers ask me something specific about SIPS, I always direct them to our to Leanne and Crystal, because they teach it every day and they know the intricacies of SIPS that I just don't know because I'm not teaching it. So I think investing in training, ongoing training, and holding a really firm line that you cannot teach SIPS if you have not been trained. And if you aren't coming to ongoing trainings, we make those required so that teachers are able to come. And we'll offer multiple trainings for them. So if it doesn't fit in their schedule, but that training and ongoing training, and even my third year SIPS teachers who have taught SIPS from the very beginning, when we have a new training, several of them will say, oh, I want to come just to get a refresher. And having informal, even if it's just a half hour where you can pull everybody, now everybody knows how to do Zoom, and it's very easy to pull teachers together, where they can just ask questions of each other or support each other, or have some type of online document where they can ask questions, or people can just help each other out. That is so important. It can't just be, I'm going to train you in SIPS and then good luck, and I hope it all works. Schools have to have a really structured, firm, ongoing training and support for teachers. It's just so essential.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Janet. I think a tip would just be familiarizing yourself with the materials. I think for us this summer, when we decided to move forward with it, we had all of our interventionists, that was their summer PD, if you will. Familiarize yourself with the materials, the curriculum, practice using it. And then when we started the school year, we had 3-hour trainings with Dawn, and then we did some touch points in the fall semester. And so we also have one of our interventionists who's a part of the cohort group, where they bring other SIPS providers together just to kind of touch base. So she's we call her SIPster, who is able to provide feedback and train our staff on things that we need assistance with. And so again, just familiarize yourself with the materials, use the Facebook chat group, talk to people. People are probably experiencing the same thing that you are. So it's good to know that you're not in this by yourself.
Ditto and ditto to what Janet and Jacklyn said. As a teacher who is implementing SIPS, when I first started, I was overwhelmed with how thick the first lesson was. And looking back, I realized that it needs to be, because it has all of the language that you need to use, and use the language. Don't try to put your own spin on it. Don't try to add cutesy words, because it goes against the validity of the program. And that's what makes SIPS so unique, is it's clear and concise. So use the language, use the QR codes. Like before I taught a lesson, I would really read through it, stop, do the QR code, because it has the corrective feedback, and you can actually listen or watch a teacher leading the lesson, and just do it. It's a little scary when you first start because you're tripping over your words, but these are little guys. They don't care what you're saying. You're smiling at them and they feel good. So just do it. And organization is really key. I've done several different methods throughout the years, and one that I kind of wanted to share, if it's okay, because this really helped us in our building. We photocopied all of the Blackline masters for the lessons, and when we were in person, we put these on a little easel next to us, and we would literally flip and go to the next part of the lesson. So this is the best thing I think I've ever done in organization in terms of SIPS, but do it. Use the learning portal, use the Facebook community. It's invaluable.
Thank you so much, Gina, Janet, and Jacklyn, for sharing your experiences and the experiences of your students and teachers with us. We appreciate your time and we honor it. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Marisa, who's going to wrap up our time together.
Well, I mean, we couldn't have asked for a better panel and a better panel facilitator. Thank you, Tamara and Janet and Gina and Jacklyn, for your expertise. You guys, the chat was going so fast and furious over here. I know there are some questions that we missed, and I really just want to encourage all of you who are listening to please reach out to me or to Tamara or to Gina, or join our Facebook group and ask your question there, because I promise you, as Jacklyn said, there are other folks who are wondering the same thing. Plus, also you can hear it from actual users, not just us. So I really want to encourage you to join us there. So as we get ready to wrap up our time together for the last 3 minutes, I just want to encourage you to think for a moment about how could SIPs support you in your work, in your context right now. And as you think about our youngest readers, those K3 babies that we've been talking about today, throw some of your thoughts about how SIPs can help do that, support you in the chat as we get ready to close out. I hope that today has been helpful for you. I hope that listening to the voices of Jacklyn and Janet and Gina share their expertise has been helpful in solidifying some thoughts that you might have. My colleagues have been putting these links in the chat all along. We really want to encourage you to download a SIPs lesson, actually look at one. And I think what Gina said earlier, right, about that first one is so thick. We did that to kind of help teachers know what to do. Then they get shorter, I promise. Once you know it, we don't keep attacking you with words. But in addition to that, if you start a trial account on the learning portal, there you have access to all of the materials. You'd be able to see them all. And I know many of you were asking about videos. So in the portal, you can see videos, classroom videos of what SIPs looks like in action all along the way. And also on our YouTube channel, there are some videos there, but the latest ones are on the portal. So I wanted to encourage you to head there as well and go ahead and start that trial. So with that, I want to say thank you so much. I know many of you are hopping off. K3 is your deal. But if you're staying on to learn more about 4th through 12th graders and how SIPs can support our older readers, there is another link. So again, go back to your confirmation email. There's another link to support you there in making that transition. So with that, I want to say thank you again on behalf of both Tamara and me to Janet and Jackie. Jacklyn, Janet, and Gina, you guys, those just sounds are getting me today. And just say thank you so much. And thanks to our other collaborative classroom colleagues for supporting us. You guys take care, and we hope to see you soon.